Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, the Green Bard. This is Dany's Dragon Bonds, Volume 2, Part 4, Flight of Fury and Fear. This episode picks up at the end of the chapter Daenerys 4, A Clash of Kings, as Dany and Drogon exit the Palace of Dust. As with their entrance, Dany and Drogon exited the compound as one. The final interaction with Drogon in the chapter happens outside as the enraged and desperate Pyat Pree attacks Dany. Drogon, Jogo, and Xaro combine to save Dany, Drogo by again flying.
Howling curses, Pyat Pree drew a knife and danced toward her, but Drogon flew at his face. Then she heard the crack of Jogo's whip, and never was a sound so sweet. The knife went flying, and an instant later Xaro was slamming Pyat to the ground. Ser Jorah Mormont knelt beside Dany in the cool green grass and put his arm around her shoulder.
I'm not quite sure why George doesn't have one of them kill Pyat here. Perhaps it was mercy, akin to the sparing of Gollum in The Lord of the Rings. Either way, Drogon's bond to Dany saved her several times in this chapter, just as we had come to expect from the direwolves in our other series. In fact, several of the themes we studied there apply to the bond in this chapter, including mirroring, the sense of touch magnifying the bond, similar to affection, protection / the sense of danger / ferocity, independence and obedience, and the danger of separation. The latter happened only when Dany was telepathically isolated during the visions. Fortunately, Drogon was still physically there, so no bad things happened. Only one theme is missing: pack. Dragons, it seems, are more solitary. It is replaced in my list with Dany's motherhood, and the value she places on her dragons, her children. To some, though, they represent power. A Clash of Kings, Daenerys 5. As Dany's story comes to a close in A Clash of Kings, the dragons and the power and danger they represent loom large, even as they are not seen directly in this chapter. Dany and Jorah contemplate the visions, and she calls the result Drogon's victory. That's how we ended the last video, in fact.
That was Drogon's victory, not mine, Dany wanted to say, but she held her tongue. The Dothraki would esteem her all the more for a few bells in her hair. She chimed as she mounted her silver mare.
Notice that Dany shares the scene with another beast with which she likely shares a telepathic bond, her silver mare. Just as the hatching of the dragons brought the Khalasar to respect Dany, Drogon's victory races Dany in their eyes again. The dragons continue to increase Dany's power in the world, but her adversaries take note as well. Xaro, Zoe, and Daxos saw the destruction of the Undying, and it confirmed his wish to own a dragon, power-hungry as he is. However, the rest of the city does not seem to approve. Some want Dany and the dragons dead. In the end, it means Qarth is no longer a safe place to remain. She contemplates her next move.
Dany herself had toyed with the idea of settling in Fias Teloro, until her dragons grew great and strong. In a flashback, Dany and Xaro banter about gifting him a dragon. We return full circle to our discussion of the value of the dragons from Dany's first A Clash of Kings chapter. That value theme has progressed to mean the power of dragons. Give you a dragon, you mean? I will not wed you, Xaro.
Denied Dany's hand and the forced gift of a dragon earlier, Xaro tries to make something of his investment in the Khalasar by bargaining for one of Dany's dragons. Dany, knowing already that the dragons are not property, despite their perceived value, prices him out of the market. For one of your dragons, you shall have 10 of the finest ships in my fleet. Dany refuses. Drogon is her companion, and Rhaegal and Viserion are her children. She asks if Xaro would part a mother from her children, to which he answers, "Why ever not? They can always make more. Mothers sell their children every day."
Not the mother of dragons.
She continues to refuse him. Dany then makes it very clear how priceless she considers her dragons.
I am trying to set a price on one of the 3 living dragons in the world. Dany smiled at him sweetly. It seems to me that 1/3 of all the ships in the world would seem fair.
Dany's valuation of the dragons here should be a major clue that her seeming to sell one in the next volume is a feint. Otherwise, she would have wanted 1/3 of all the armies in the world, right? Dany goes on to contemplate the visions in the Palace of Dust. They are no more comprehensible to her than they are to us. But dragons are mentioned so many times that we can be sure these visions are extremely important to what will come for Dany. Some of it ties back to her king's blood, some to the three-headed dragon.
Child of three, they had called her, daughter of death, slayer of lies, bride of fire. So many threes. 3 fires, 3 mounts to ride, 3 treasons. The dragon has 3 heads, she sighed. Do you know what that means, Jorah? Your Grace? The sigil of House Targaryen is a 3-headed dragon, red on black. I know that, but there are no 3-headed dragons. The 3 heads were Aegon and his sisters.
Mormont, of course, later suggests that Dany should conquer Westeros with her own 3-headed dragon of dragon/dragon rider pairs, hoping to become one of the riders himself, something that will never come to pass. The next dragon mention foreshadows the Aegon plot. Will young Griff perhaps ride a dragon alongside Dany? While the passage points to Varys in his mummery, I think the term Mummer's Dragon also hints that Aegon may be a false dragon, so I have a feeling he will never be one of Dany's 3 heads of the dragon. Should it ever come to pass that Dany and 2 others ride dragons together, my initial guesses to the identities of the other 2 would be Jon Snow, riding his father's namesake, and Tyrion on Viserion. A Mummer's Dragon, you said. What is a Mummer's Dragon, pray?
A cloth dragon on poles, Dany explained. Mummers use them in their follies, to give the heroes something to fight.
The Aegon plot may indeed be a folly, but one that won't get many killed. The next dragon mention goes back to the 3-headed dragon. That Rhaegar is also mentioned brings to mind Rhaegar's actual son, Jon Snow, as well as the claimed Aegon. Rhaegar, after all, was trying to make his own 3-headed dragon with his children. Aegon, Rhaenys, and Jon Snow, mentioned here as the missing Visenya.
They murdered Rhaegar's daughter as well, the little princess. Rhaenys, she was named, like Aegon's sister. There was no Visenya, but he said the dragon has 3 heads. What is the Song of Ice and Fire?
The Song of Ice and Fire is, of course, complicated. Rhaegar said his is the Song of Ice and Fire, referring to his first son, Aegon, the babe in Aelia's arms from Dany's vision, who I believe was indeed killed at the hands of Gregor Clegane, meaning that the boy we meet as Aegon in A Dance with Dragons would be a fake Targaryen, a Mummer's Dragon, truly a boy of Blackfyre lineage, though he could still be one of the 3 heads of the dragon in the end. What is the Song of Ice and Fire? In short, it is the combination of the Azor Ahai prophecy, the prophecy of the prince that was promised, and the reliving of the story of the last hero. The Targaryen part to play in this song was a large part of the plot in the first season of House of the Dragon on HBO. King Viserys I learned that Aegon the Conqueror received a prophecy that suggested that the Targaryens and the dragons must save Westeros from the coming long night. I believe that Rhaegar was also privy to this prophecy through his reading in the library at the Red Keep. His ill-fated 3-headed dragon was an attempt to fulfill the prophecy. He may have been partially successful if you believe that Jon Snow is his son and is one of the dragon riders that will succeed against the others. Also, for more insight into what the Song of Ice and Fire means to our author, I would refer you to my King's Blood series, specifically King's Blood 3, where I discuss George R. R. Martin's fascination with Robert Frost's poem Fire and Ice, and Dylan Thomas's Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. The Song of Ice and Fire, then, to me, is the struggle between love and hate, coldness and passion, desire and calculation, life and death. Moving to the next passage, the story of Drogon's destruction of the House of Dust spread throughout the city quickly, so the city has abruptly turned on Dany and her people because of fear of the dragons.
Perhaps she had lingered in Qarth too long, seduced by its comforts and its beauties. It was a city that always promised more than it would give you, it seemed to her, and her welcome here had turned sour since the House of the Undying had collapsed in a great gout of smoke and flame. Overnight the Qartheen had come to remember that dragons were dangerous. No longer did they vie with each other to give her gifts. Instead, the Tormund Brotherhood had called openly for her expulsion, and the ancient Guild of Spicers for her death. It was all Xaro could do to keep the 13 from joining them.
However, the danger represented by dragons also impedes their attempts to book passage from Qarth.
You require passage for 100 Dothraki, all their horses, yourself, and this knight, and 3 dragons?
Later.
The cargo master of the Mirrish galley, Silken Spirit, opined that dragons were too dangerous at sea, where any stray breath of flame might set the rigging afire. The owner of Lord Pharaoh's belly would risk dragons, but not Dothraki.
Things are so bad that while she is negotiating with a merchant, she is assaulted by an assassin. Both men use her moniker, Mother of Dragons. It is clear that this dragon has worn out her welcome.
And for the Mother of Dragons, only 30 honors.
Later.
A Qarthian stepped into her path. Mother of Dragons, for you. He knelt and thrust a jewel box into her face.
She is rescued from the assassin by Arstan Whitebeard, who is Ser Barristan Selmy in disguise, along with Strong Belwas, a book-only character who was a slave of Illyrio Mopatis. Belwas says of his master,
"He would have dragons," said Belwas gruffly, "and the girl who makes them, he would have you."
His lack of eloquence makes it clear that Illyrio is power-hungry for her dragons, just like Xaro. Combining these with those who want her gone or dead, Dany's adversaries are piling up. Fortunately, she turns Illyrio's people into her own people. In any case, the assassination attempt lays bare Dany's need for haste in quitting Qarth. She needs to protect her people and her children, as expressed in her responses to Belwas and Arstan, as follows.
Joy bloomed in her heart, but Dany kept it from her face. "I have 3 dragons," she said, "and more than 100 in my Khalazar, with all their goods and horses."
After introducing her blood riders.
"They crossed the Red Waste with me and saw my dragons born."
The blood riders are also her protection. This brings to mind our dragon themes, and we remember the theme of separation, because this attack happened when her dragons weren't there to protect her.
"Regal," Dany laughed. "She had no dragon with her."
In closing this volume, every mention of dragons in this chapter hit on our dragon themes or other important themes in the story. Combined, the 4 mentions of the 3 heads of the dragon, coupled with 2 mentions of Targaryen conquerors, 4 mentions of the danger or strength of dragons, 3 mentions of dragons existing, 2 mentions of blood of the dragon, and 2 mentions of a mummer's dragon are references to the inherent power of dragons, implying that they bring such power to Dany. The mentions of having a dragon, 8, or the value of a dragon, 3, entwined with 3 mentions of Dany being the mother of dragons. This familial connection is in opposition to the idea of dragons as a possession or commercial item. I believe that this tension and Dany's stance on selling one of them to Xaro is a foreshadowing of the coming storm of Dany's selling one of her dragons in Astapor and her smashing the slave trade. Drogon proved in the prior chapter that a dragon can think for itself. Dragons have free will. Both these concepts, the independent identity and inherent power of a dragon, will be put to good use in the next volumes. Drogon's escapade in the House of the Undying was only a taste, foreshadowing the dragons playing a much more active role in the future. I leave you with the last mention of dragons in this volume.
3 heads has the dragon, Dany thought, wondering. I shall tell my people to make ready to depart at once, but the ships that bring me home must bear different names. As you wish, said Arstan. What names would you prefer? Vhagar, Daenerys told him, Meraxes, and Balerion. Paint the names on their hulls in golden leathers, 3 feet high, Arstan. I want every man who sees them to know the dragons are returned.
Thanks to all the terrific artists featured on these videos. Thanks especially to those in my family who helped in this series so far. If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.